truth is the most convincing story that maps onto reality, and that's why the central narrative is falling apart.
Right now in the United States, people should not be walking around with masks.
We must see the central narrative for the fiction that it is. We are Americans.
While elections are sometimes messy, this was a secure election.
The founders began the fight for human liberty and self-governance, and it's up to us to finish the job.
I'll tell you what, we are in a truth emergency right now.
This is the end game.
It's Thursday, May 30th, 2024, the 1226th day of dystopia. I'm your moderator, Chris Paul. Let's be reasonable. A warm welcome and hello to all of you listening through a paid subscription at imyourmoderator.substack.com. When you become a paid subscriber, you get the ad-free experience, you get to participate in the conversation on Substack, and you get to join the interactive live streams every Wednesday afternoon. You can become a paid subscriber for as little as $50 a year or $5 a month, and in doing so, you will be supporting me, the work I do, and this show as it expands. And if you can't or you simply don't want to, continue listening to the podcast for free on Substack or a wide variety of podcast platforms, and of course, Rumble. All I ask is that you share it with your friends. You can find the links to the podcast, the writing, the social media, and the merch site by visiting linktree.com/I'm your moderator. Anyone who understands the roller coaster we've been on these past few years knows we haven't reached the end yet, and there may still be hard times to come. And as we add $1 trillion to the national debt every 100 days, we could be headed for some shaky financial times. If you're like me, you're figuring out how to diversify and make sure some seeds are planted for whatever may come. And that's one of the many reasons I think Bitcoin is part of our future. But it's not only about money. Bitcoin looks to be a critical part of the next generation of technology, communications, energy, verification, and even national defense. I'd encourage everyone to do their research and do it now. And if you're convinced of the likelihood that Bitcoin is an essential part of our future, then you'll need an on-ramp. I recommend River. River empowers you to grow your portfolio without any unwanted surprises and eliminates third-party custodians, putting you in control of your assets. Open an account with no minimum purchase requirement. You can get your Bitcoin journey started with just $1. Visit partner.river.com/reasonable to create your River account today. That's partner.river.com/reasonable. Now, I know that many of you out there understand the need to diversify assets, or maybe you're looking to protect your retirement savings, but you're not quite there yet on Bitcoin, and you feel better about precious metals. I get that too. I think going in multiple directions is wise, and I do that myself. And when it comes to buying precious metals, you want to be working with a good company, and that's why I've partnered with Goldco. Goldco is a 6-time Inc. 5000 winner, 2022 Company of the Year, and they've helped people like you and me place over $2 billion in gold and silver. And I have gotten silver from Goldco. And right now they're offering my supporters up to $10,000 in bonus silver while supplies last. Don't pass this offer up. Go to reasonablegold.com now. This is your opportunity to protect you and your family from an out-of-control government before it's too late. So don't wait a second longer. Take action today. Click on the link in the podcast notes or go to reasonablegold.com now and get your free gold kit, your free IRA kit. You'll be glad you did. Yesterday, during the live stream, I started the broadcast off with a bit of a follow-up on the Samuel Alito flag controversy, as it's called. It's not actually a controversy. It is a controversy generated by the media. They are attempting to create a controversy where there actually is no controversy. We talked last week about how members of Congress had sent a letter to Samuel Alito. Yesterday, I was thinking it was Hank Johnson in the House. It was Dick Durbin and Sheldon Whitehouse in the Senate, so I want to correct that. But the story from yesterday was about how Alito had responded in a letter of his own to Durbin and Whitehouse, letting them know that he would not be recusing himself over the fact that his wife turned a flag upside down and at another property had an appeal to heaven flag flying. Alito said in his letter, the two incidents you cite do not meet the conditions for recusal. As I have stated publicly, I had nothing whatsoever to do with the flying of that flag. I was not even aware of the upside down flag until it was called to my attention. And I mentioned yesterday, I proposed a conspiracy theory, a speculative conspiracy theory, a baseless claim for which there is no evidence. But I was simply pointing out how possible it would be for someone who wanted to generate this picture from nothing and then attempt to use it against Alito, how possible it would be for a person like that to simply flip his flag over. Now, the story is that Alito's wife hung the flag, but we are dealing with an obvious effort to discredit a Supreme Court justice, the man who wrote the Dobbs decision, a man whose neighbors in Alexandria, Virginia, have protested in front of his house despite that being illegal. And that effort is being made nearly 3.5 years after this flag was supposedly flown. Whoever took these pictures held on to them for an awfully long time. Did the neighbors take the pictures? Did they have them? Did the New York Times have these pictures for 3.5 years? It was around this time in 2022 that the Dobbs decision was leaked. It was leaked about a month before the decision would be handed down. And the idea was that protesters were going to put pressure on these justices to get them to change their decisions. So could the idea here be that Alito has to recuse himself from a decision that's already been made? Something that may have gone 5-4 that would then just be 4-4? Or is it all just a PR attempt to delegitimize the court as they hand down the set of decisions from this Supreme Court session, which will be happening at some point within the next 4 weeks? The timing is coordinated. The story and the controversy are totally contrived. And once you understand that the situation is contrived, it exists for the sake of the narrative, then at that point, all bets are off about what's really going on here. But let's stick with the surface interpretation as it's given to us by the news, confirmed in some sense by Alito. CNN wrote, the letter is a highly unusual response underscoring how the revelations about the flags have dogged Alito for days. Supreme Court justices rarely get into a back and forth with lawmakers, and many members of the court do not explain their reasons for recusing or not. So now they're upset that Alito actually took this head on and wrote a letter explaining his decision. He wrote, my wife is a private citizen and she possesses the same First Amendment rights as every other American. She makes her own decisions, and I have always respected her right to do so. My wife is fond of flying flags. I am not. And various television characters on MSNBC and CNN last night and this morning have been freaking out about that, wondering why Alito can't control his wife, just as they were wondering why Clarence Thomas can't control his wife, Ginny Thomas. This is the state of current feminism. People like Molly Jong-Fast. She looks like a Batman villain. She spent 2020 weeping and shivering, huddled up under a blanket in the corner of her New York apartment. She used to brag about how she would never, ever leave because the very deadly pandemic was outside, and she wanted everyone to know that she was on her best behavior. She's on television asking why Supreme Court justices can't control their wives. The article notes, by the way, what the upside down flag was in response to. We talked a bit about it last week. This neighbor down the street that was creating problems. The CNN article says, following the story, Alito said in a statement he had no involvement whatsoever in the flying of the flag and that it was briefly flown by his wife in response to a neighbor's yard signs, one of which, the justice told Fox News, read F Trump, but with the whole word. Neighbors with whom CNN spoke following reports of the flag said they recalled the flag being inverted, but said they didn't know what it meant and there was no public reaction at the time. So no one cared. According to the Times, a neighbor involved in the exchange with Martha Ann Alito called police after several encounters with the justice's wife in early 2021 after the neighbor had placed yard signs which were critical of Republicans and the justice. Alito also told Fox News that the neighbor used the term CUNT at one point during the exchanges. Pictures obtained by the Times show the neighbor holding signs that include Alito was at J6 along with abort SCOTUS following the ruling overturning Roe versus Wade. So the neighbors sound like lovely people. I'm a bit cued in on the fact that it says the neighbor was holding signs. Was the neighbor participating in the illegal protest outside Alito's house? The Alitos are essentially the victims in this story, and we are supposed to believe that Samuel Alito was doing all of this in order to overturn the results of a free and fair election. I mentioned yesterday that Trump addressed this on Truth Social, saying, "Congratulations to United States Supreme Court Justice Samuel Alito for showing the intelligence, courage, and guts to refuse stepping aside from making a decision on anything January 6th related. All U.S. judges, justices, and leaders should have such grit. Our country would be far more advanced than its current status as a badly failing nation, headed by the worst president in American history, crooked Joe Biden." Trump went on to the Dan Bongino podcast yesterday for an interview, talking about how Alito was strong, a tough guy, very, very smart, and saying that he put out a very strong statement. Trump commented again this morning on Truth Social. He wrote, "Playing the ref with Justice Alito doesn't work. It works with many others, but not with him." And so, as usual, you are being presented with multiple interpretations of the same principles. Donald Trump is praising Alito for not recusing himself over something so absurd, while at the same time, Donald Trump continues to point out the injustice being done in the Law and Order New York, the Loudest Hush Money television show / fake trial brought by DA Alvin Bragg, where Judge Merchan has refused to recuse himself, even though his daughter receives massive payments from prominent Democrats who have spent years going after Donald Trump. We need to see the parallel system. We need to see the two-tiered system of justice. We need to understand the importance of these principles because they're going to flip back around. We're going to see them exercised in the other direction. And we want to handle that with maturity and rationality rather than doing what all of the lunatics on MSNBC and CNN are doing right now. There's a whole new field of legal expertise on television. They're telling us all of their very, very important opinions. Russia hoaxer Andrew Weissman is out there talking about how he has a man crush on Judge Merchan. The talking heads are saying things like, "Oh, yes, I think the prosecution proved its case beyond a reasonable doubt." In fact, I think I saw James Comey saying almost exactly that. We were told yesterday that the jury broke from their deliberations to come back into the courtroom and hear some of the testimony over again. That's how you know, according to the legal experts, that this jury is really taking things seriously. They're not just going to convict Trump as if they had planned to the whole time. That would make this look like a show trial. You see, they're going to go in, they're going to really deliberate. They're going to take their time. Could they have handed down a decision yesterday? Sure, but they didn't because they need more deliberation. Could they hand down a decision today? Yes. But will they? Probably not, because we need to be told that they need more deliberation. And then tomorrow they will convict Trump, and we'll be told that Donald Trump is now a convicted felon. And they will say that thousands and thousands of times. And you're just going to have to be ready for that. And when a communist says to you, well, are you going to stop supporting Trump now that he's a convicted felon? You can just simply say, hey, commie, what crime was Donald Trump convicted for? And what was the evidence of that crime? Can you tell me, commie? And then say, hey, commie, do you know that there are going to be appeals? You don't know that, do you? And then you can even try a, hey, commie, we've been expecting this for a long time. In fact, we've been looking forward to the pictures of Donald Trump in jail, because that is going to make him even more popular than he is right now. And he is at his most popular right now. He has never been so popular, not even in November of 2020, where he was so popular that he increased his 2016 vote total by 20%. While you said he did a terrible job and was hated during his first term as president, and then you had to create like 27 million new voters in order to make Joe Biden from his basement the most popular presidential candidate of all time. Oh, it's working out great for you so far, commie. You probably got us this time. And hey, commie, how is Donald Trump going to be a dictator if the other party is the party locking up their political opponents? You see, the thing about these communists is they think they have their silver bullet now. They think they're going to finally have gotten Trump. And now that they've gotten Trump, that means that you have to stop liking Trump. You're going to be too ashamed, too embarrassed to go out and support for president a convicted felon. According to them, that is the strategy. You can't possibly be supporting a convicted felon for president, can you? That's what they'll say. They'll think that's very powerful, because for them, everything is about reputation in the party of false decorum. You don't want to be the sort of person who would vote for a convicted felon for president, because somehow that makes you a criminal, I guess. But here's the thing. You just laugh right in their faces. These people will go along with a stolen election in broad daylight right in front of everybody. They will lie to everyone's faces and pretend that they know somehow Joe Biden received 81 million real lawful American votes while being unable to fill up the social distancing circles painted on the grass at his outdoor event that can only have 20 people at it. The most votes of all time. They will call their neighbors domestic terrorists. They will suggest that their children be taken from them because they didn't want to take a vaccine. They change the definition of words. They indoctrinate children. They encourage perverts undergoing identity crises to rub their crotches in children's faces. They applaud the government's false flags and hope that those false flags be used as justification to further oppress their neighbors. They hope and pray for foreign wars, even if it's a quote unquote nuclear war, just so they don't have to admit they're wrong to you. And now they think they finally got you. Laugh in their faces. These same people now want Samuel Alito to recuse. They want to find a way to call into question and delegitimize all the Supreme Court decisions that will be coming out over the next 4 weeks. Are they going to get rid of Alito? Are they going to get rid of Thomas? No, they're not. But I suppose they are desperate. They think that is the only solution. So they are going to continue selling that story. And today, the New York Times runs another headline. Experts question Alito's failure to recuse himself in flag controversy. So now they are going to legal experts to get them to tell the audience of the New York Times that Alito really should have recused himself, even though he didn't, which means we're going to have to put pressure on him once again. And if he refuses, we're going to need to let everyone know that this court's decisions don't matter. We're going to reinstall Joe Biden. He's going to expand the size of the court, and then the court will immediately overturn all these decisions. That's the recipe for success. When the system, our democracy, doesn't suit the purposes of the global regime, well then, it's time to change the system, whether or not you want it changed. At some point, you should realize, hey, this government is not of, by, and for the people. In fact, they don't seem to care what the people want at all. And once you have that thought, if your next thought after that is about winning elections, then you don't get it. I don't know what else to tell you. They show you in every possible way that they do not care at all what the people want, but still, there are among us Americans who think that these people are going to let them vote. Oh, yeah, sure, your elections, very safe, very secure, and the only responsible path out of this. We have to preserve our institutions. Sure, they're corrupt and infiltrated, and everything they do is disgustingly immoral. But yeah, we need to put everything else aside and just make sure that we preserve them. People are so afraid of chaos that they will let the other side, that is chaos, it represents chaos, it causes chaos, we will allow them all the free shots on goal they want because we are unwilling to introduce chaos in their plan. That is what Donald Trump was willing to do. That's why the establishment hated him, because they can't stand chaos. For them, everything is planned. That's what allows them to check out and detach. When they're not just methodically implementing the plan as given to them from above, they have no idea what to do because they don't have any objective standards through which they can see and interpret the world. But we just think it's so responsible to believe in our institutions that we will avoid creating any chaos for them because we are so afraid of the chaos they create for us. This is the New York Times today. Supreme Court justices seldom give reasons for their decisions to recuse themselves. Even rarer are explanations for deciding to participate in a case when they have been accused of conflicts of interest. Justice Samuel A. Alito, Jr. is an exception. He seems positively eager to explain himself. But whether his explanation has helped or hurt his case is open to question. You don't agree with him? That's so sad. It sounds like their feelings are hurt. On Wednesday, Justice Alito wrote letters to Democratic lawmakers saying he was not only permitted but also obligated to sit on two cases arising from the January 6, 2021 attack on the Capitol, despite controversies over flags displayed outside his houses associated with the Stop the Steal movement, only associated with that movement by people who choose to make that association. And Alito is right. It absolutely is his duty to participate in these cases. That is what his job is. Since they weren't able to expand the court, the Uniparty and its media simply want to reduce the court of justices who might make the quote-unquote wrong decisions. Experts in legal ethics said they welcomed Justice Alito's decision to explain himself, but they were not persuaded by the reasoning in his letters, which said the flags had been flown by his wife, and so did not require him to step aside in the pending cases on whether former President Donald J. Trump is immune from prosecution, and on whether a federal obstruction law covers participants in the January 6th assault. You really got to wonder why the people with these pictures of this upside down flag didn't come forward before these cases were ever heard. They only came forward right as the decisions were about to come down. How strange. The controversy surrounding Justice Alito reflects wider questions about ethics and politics at the court. Public trust in the court has fallen amid a swirl of ethics scandals in recent years, many involving whether justices should have recused themselves, and scrutiny is certain to be intense as they decide cases concerning Trump that could influence the outcome of the next election. Are these decisions really going to affect the outcome of the election? No. If the elections remained rigged, then the decision will be made regardless of what voters think. And if the elections are legitimate, then Trump will win no matter what the outcome is. So what they're really talking about is narrative impact in a world where the elections are still rigged. In the original article about the upside down flag, the New York Times mentioned a professor at the University of Virginia in their law department, a woman named Amanda Frost, and they quote her again in this article. I agree that Justice Alito's wife has a First Amendment right to express her views, but if she does so on their shared property in a way that would lead a reasonable person to question his impartiality, then he should respond by recusing himself. These people are so stupid. Professor Frost added that her conclusion would be no different had the controversy involved a liberal member of the court like Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who died in 2020. I would say the same, she said, if Justice Ginsburg's husband had placed a Gore won sign on the lawn of their shared home while the Bush-Gore election was being contested in the courts. And of course, this is a ridiculous comparison. Ruth Bader Ginsburg was actually an activist Supreme Court justice. And speaking of old RBG, while the New York Times is running this narrative trying to get Samuel Alito recused, they are also publishing this piece on Tuesday, the untold story of the network that took down Roe v. Wade. So it seems like they're trying to hit this from multiple angles. They want to delegitimize Samuel Alito and Clarence Thomas as much as possible before these decisions come down over the next few weeks, and probably in anticipation of the fact that as things stand now, they're probably planning to steal another election in November. And speaking of elections, boom, segue, let's follow up on the story from last week about Julie Adams, the woman on the Fulton County Board of Registration and Elections. This is from the Associated Press today. Election board member in Georgia's Fulton County abstains from certifying primary election. The election board in Georgia's largest county voted Tuesday to certify its May 21st election results, but not before one of the board's Republican-appointed members abstained. The abstention by Fulton County Election Board member Julie Adams aligns with her lawsuit seeking to more closely control election operations and to win a legal ruling finding county election boards can refuse to certify election results. It's almost shocking in its simplicity. The county election board, the entity charged with certifying the election results, doesn't have the option to choose not to certify the results. It's almost like they just have all these extra people added into the process to create layers of plausible deniability and ways to disperse the illegality of what's happening. The Secretary of State certifies the election, but they rely on all the certifications from the counties. And the counties, they rely on the certifications from the Board of Registrations and Elections. But that board relies on the certification of the election director. Everybody else just certifies that the person below him or her did indeed certify it. And if it's fraud all the way up and down, if the election director who originally certified it had no ability to truthfully certify it, well, then it was just a glitch or maybe human error, probably in the election process, which is a system with all the same features built in for plausible deniability and making it impossible to hold anyone responsible for any part of it. It's amazing how these systems are put together. It's like they're all put together by the same people, and the purpose of all these systems is just to cheat. Reading a prepared statement, Adams argued she couldn't accept the results given prior election administration problems in the county, and argued that the board has illegally given its power to employees. It's time to fix the problems in our elections by ensuring compliance with the law, transparency in election conduct, and accuracy in results, Adams said. And in my duty as a board member, I want to make sure that happens. The other 4 members, including Republican-appointed Michael Heekin, voted to certify the results in what Elections Director Nadine Williams called a very successful election. The Democrat Party chair, Representative Nikema Williams, said Trump and MAGA Republicans have made it clear they're planning to try to block certification of November's election when they are defeated again, and this is a transparent attempt to set the stage for that fight. Well, Nikema, I guess we will see. Does what you're saying remain true if the judge agrees with Adams that the members of the County Board of Registration and Elections are not meant to serve as simply rubber stamps in their role as those who certify the election results? And as I discussed briefly yesterday, Trump's been hammering pretty hard on the point that Judge Merchan is barring him from using advice of counsel as a defense. Trump is ostensibly being accused of a bookkeeping error where a legal expense was marked down as a legal expense by someone other than Trump. Trump is apparently in trouble for all of this, and he's not allowed to argue that he was doing this under the advice of counsel, his lawyer. He is exposing a situation in our system of quote unquote justice and quote unquote law where people use advice of counsel as a defense, essentially asserting that their lawyer told them it was okay for them to do that. Therefore, it's not their fault. It gives them plausible deniability. You have to wonder how many crimes are committed with this in mind, with this as a defense planned in advance. If the judge in this case in Fulton County sides with Adams, what does that mean for the other 4 board members who went ahead and certified this recent primary election without getting any information? It would have still been their fiduciary duty to ensure that the results they certified were actually accurate and true, which would have required more information instead of acting as a rubber stamp. In response to that, they would then say, well, you see, we can't be held responsible for any of that because we had it on advice of counsel that our role on the BRE was only as that rubber stamp. That's how the lawyers told us that law should be interpreted. So we can't possibly be held responsible for something that our lawyers said we could do. It's honestly like getting a permission slip to leave school. See, my dad says I need to leave at 1 p.m. He wrote me this note. Same thing with these political criminals. Hey, my lawyer gave me permission to do whatever I wanted. He said this is what the law is, and he wrote me this note, Ali Ali Oxenfree. Both of these issues, the principles involved and the state of our justice system, this 2-tiered system of justice, both of these examples, the Alito flag recusal stuff and the advice of counsel stuff, these are both highlighted by Donald Trump in this fake trial. And sometimes you just have to stand back and marvel at how many principles we have been taught about our government and about how this evil global regime has operated for centuries, about how our law works, about other people's motivations. All of this has been so clearly defined and illustrated by all of these events over the last 9 years. And these court cases, despite being fake and meaningless, in many important ways are still narratively relevant because they highlight all of these issues and all of these principles that are relevant to so much of everything else that's going on. And staying with elections for a second and adding in our favorite, the author of the Color Revolution Playbook, the author of the papers at the Brookings Institution that served as the basis for all of these Trump cases and indictments, Norm Eisen, who, by the way, found himself unable to walk down the street last week because he is such an evil little communist hanging out outside the Trump trials in New York. Well, a man named Yehuda Miller has turned up evidence via FOIA'd email releases that Norm Eisen's law firm was involved with discussions about the Michigan electors following the 2020 election. This was covered on Tuesday in the Gateway Pundit. huge email discussion marked confidential shows discussion about Michigan electors with Trump impeachment lawyers and Office of Attorney Norm Eisen, who attended law school with Barack Obama and is the architect of the lawfare cases against Trump. This is Patty McMurray writing for the Gateway Pundit. On November 12, 2020, only 9 days after the hotly contested presidential election, a chain of emails shared with the Gateway Pundit by independent investigator Yehuda Miller showed communications between the unashamed lawfare queen of Michigan, Democrat Attorney General Dana Nessel, her then deputy chief Christina Grossi, two top Trump impeachment lawyers, and senior counsel for Massachusetts Attorney General Samantha Schusterman. And McMurray highlights a man named Barry Burke, who was the lead counsel for the Democrats in Trump's first and second impeachment hoaxes. According to Newsweek, Burke previously served as special counsel during Trump's first impeachment. For Trump's historic second impeachment trial, House Judiciary Committee Chairman Jerry Nadler and lead impeachment manager Jamie Raskin said that Burke had once again been, quote, retained on a consulting basis, end quote, to represent House Democrats. He has also represented Deutsche Bank, the financial institution that has reportedly moved to cut ties with Trump after decades of business and billions of dollars in loans to the outgoing president. The November 12, 2020 email chain had been marked, quote, confidential, cannot be released under FOIA or discovery request, end quote, by the Michigan Attorney General's office. That's rather amazing. Government records that cannot be released under the Freedom of Information Act or even for a discovery request in a court case. So they were doing their damnedest to hide this information, or potentially it was tied up somewhere else. The first email was sent to Barry Burke and to Samantha Schusterman, the senior counsel for the AG's Office of Massachusetts. Two lawyers working for Norm Eisen's law firm, Michelle Ben David and Joanna Lidgate, were CC'd on the email. The email's subject is Michigan Elector Certification Process, Privileged and Confidential, Attorney Work Product / Common Interest Privilege. The Trump impeachment lawyer for the Democrats, Barry Burke, writes, Sam, I attach a memo regarding potential challenges in connection with Michigan's elector certification process. Could I trouble you to share it with Christina Grossi and Mark Totten? What does Samantha Schusterman, senior counsel for the Massachusetts Democrat Attorney General Andrea Joy Campbell, have to do with the Michigan electors case? Why is Trump impeachment lawyer Barry Burke sending an email to her about, quote, potential elector challenges in connection with Michigan's elector certification process, end quote? Was Barry Burke plotting in advance of the alternate slate of electors cast by the Michigan GOP electors 1 month later on December 14th, 2020? Why were the emails marked confidential and privileged multiple times regarding, quote, potential challenges in connection with Michigan's elector certification process? Why were the emails about Michigan electors being shared by one Trump impeachment lawyer with the office of Norm Eisen, another Trump impeachment lawyer, a former law school classmate of Barack Obama, as well as the former President Obama's quote unquote ethics czar and ambassador to the Czech Republic? According to a previous Gateway Pundit report, Norm Eisen is also the key architect behind the color revolution and lawfare cases against President Trump. Aside from representing the Democrats in their impeachment efforts against President Trump, it's alleged that Eisen is the architect behind the lawfare we see being used as a tool across the nation to take down President Trump's lawyers and his most essential leaders and electors in critical swing states. Now, I'm far less interested in what's going on with the swing state aspect. They wouldn't be swing states if we had legitimate elections. Than I am with the connection between the Massachusetts Attorney General's office, the Michigan Secretary of State's office, the alternate electors in Michigan who were barred from entering the Michigan State House, and color revolutionist lawfare expert Norm Eisen. There is a story in there yet to be told. I don't know what it is, but this is certainly something interesting to keep an eye on. Now, changing subjects without a segue, let's talk about Elon Musk. We haven't done that in a while. Perhaps that's because I'm not on Twitter right now, but this was from Axios yesterday. They are reporting on a big piece in the Wall Street Journal. The headline, Trump weighs possible advisory role for Elon Musk, WSJ reports. Former President Trump and Elon Musk have begun speaking on the phone several times a month, including about a potential advisory role for the Tesla CEO in a second Trump administration. Musk has become one of President Biden's most prominent online critics, leveraging his massive X platform to attack Democrats and promote Trump's messaging on the 2024 election's top issues. And that is such a weird thing. Not only that it happens, but that the media focuses so much time on reporting about it, because Elon Musk is the leading recipient of Department of Defense contracts, and Joe Biden is, we're told, the president of the United States of America and the commander-in-chief of the military. And here we have a private, quote unquote, corporate contractor constantly mocking and making fun of and insulting Joe Biden and talking about how terrible a job he's doing. I mean, imagine the balls on that private contractor. Isn't he worried about losing all those contracts? I mean, Joe is the president and commander in chief, isn't he? Elon's like, hey, I'm shutting off the satellites over Ukraine in your proxy war. Joe Biden can't remove his contracts. Oh, hey, there are reports of the Russians using Starlink, and Joe Biden doesn't remove his contracts. We've gone through plenty of examples of this over the past couple of years, and Joe Biden just doesn't remove his contracts. For some reason, it's just crazy, but for some reason, the fake president and all of the members of this global regime, they just can't seem to exert any leverage on Elon Musk. It's like they're all puppets, just pretending to hold power. It's like they have no legitimacy at all. Let's continue. The billionaire ex-mogul hasn't officially endorsed Trump, but the two met privately in March as the former president sought to boost his fundraising ahead of the general election. Since then, Trump and Musk have developed a closer relationship and exchanged views on immigration, electric vehicles, the U.S. Space Force, and Musk's portfolio of companies, according to the Journal. By the way, the Wall Street Journal's source for the information about these conversations and what was discussed, people familiar with the talks. The loose role Trump has floated for Musk would be similar to that of former Marvel chairman Ike Perlmutter, a longtime Trump acquaintance who quietly helped shape policies at the Department of Veterans Affairs, the Journal reports. So Iron Man's role is going to be similar to that of the chairman of Marvel. Okay. Musk, who said he voted Republican for the first time in 2022, has become a fierce critic of DEI policies and the Biden administration's handling of the southern border. He has frequently spread misinformation about undocumented immigrants and voter fraud, and in March wrote on X, "There is either a red wave this November or America is doomed." That position probably represents like 80% of the American people. It's funny that they act like somehow this is strange or that this makes Elon Musk a right-wing extremist. Musk resigned from a pair of White House business advisory councils in 2017 after Trump withdrew the U.S. from the Paris Climate Agreement. A lot of people forget that Elon was in the White House working with Trump and Bannon and the rest of them, and then he had to pretend that he was very upset that now the Earth would not be saved from the sun. The Journal reports that Musk and billionaire Nelson Peltz are investing in a data-driven project aimed at preventing voter fraud, which has long been a Trump obsession. How about that? Elon Musk working on voter fraud. And let's finish this out, and then we'll get into some of that stuff. There was no evidence of widespread voter fraud in the 2020 election, a fact repeatedly affirmed by Trump's own Attorney General, Bill Barr. Actually, it's not a fact. It's just something that was said over and over and over again, including by Bill Barr. Still, Musk and Peltz told Trump about the plan at a meeting in March, according to the Journal, and briefed him on their private efforts to convince elite business leaders not to support Biden in November. Tesla is facing multiple investigations from the Biden administration, giving Musk and Trump common cause despite their differences on climate policy and the importance of electric vehicles. Oh, yes, those are just such important issues to both of them. Still, the details of Musk's potential role in a future Trump administration remain incomplete and unofficial. President Trump will be the only voice of what role an individual plays in his presidency, Trump campaign spokesman Brian Hughes told the Journal. So let's find out a little bit more about this man, Nelson Peltz. His Wikipedia entry says Nelson Peltz, born in 1942, is an American billionaire, businessman, and investor. He is a founding partner, together with Peter May and Edward Garden, of Trion Partners, an alternative investment management fund based in New York. He is non-executive chairman of Wendy's Company, Cisco, and the Madison Square Garden Company. He is a former director of H.J. Heinz Company, Mondelez International, and Ingersoll Rand, and a former CEO of Triangle Industries. So this man has had significant roles at significant companies and seems to have been quite successful. His organization, Trion Partners, invested in those companies just listed, where he then took over those executive roles, and a bunch of other companies, all household name brands. Peltz was born to a Jewish family in 1942 in Brooklyn. He, like Donald Trump, attended Wharton School of Business. But let's scroll on down to the politics section. Peltz has been described as a notable Republican donor, though he has described his own sympathies as centrist, saying this country operates way better between center-right and center-left. He's a longtime friend and supporter of U.S. Senator Joe Manchin, a Democrat, who he is credited with keeping our elected officials somewhere in the middle. He organized a fundraiser for Trump in 2020, but then publicly bailed out after the very violent insurrection and supported the fake primary campaign of none other than Ron DeSantis. But let's go to the Hollywood Reporter from April 4th, so nearly 2 months ago. Nelson Peltz says Elon Musk has no ego, says it was ego in the room that was responsible for Disney loss. Fresh off his bruising loss in the proxy fight against the Walt Disney Company, the activist investor Nelson Peltz appeared on CNBC to discuss the fight in a conversation with Jim Cramer. I'm willing to give them the opportunity to prove me wrong. I'm willing to give them the opportunity to do as they say, Peltz said. The shareholders have voted. They want to give management and the board a chance, so be it. We will watch like we did last time. Peltz said he was very surprised that after the Institutional Shareholder Services recommendation in his favor, most institutional investors still voted for the Disney board. If you look at their comments were beautiful. They were very complimentary. But at the end of the day, they checked the box, and you'll have to ask them why they did it. I've got my feelings, but I'm not going to talk about it here on television. But you should ask them. I was very disappointed, to say the least, that after the beautiful comments and after the good meetings we had with them, they decided to vote against us. Now, just a day before that, in The Telegraph UK, there was an article Elon Musk would definitely buy Disney shares if billionaire activist wins board seats. Elon Musk has vowed to take a stake in Disney if billionaire activist investor Nelson Peltz wins his battle to secure a seat on the U.S. entertainment giant's board. Mr. Musk, writing on the social media site X, formerly Twitter, said the hedge fund manager should definitely be on the Disney board. He added, "While I don't own any Disney shares today, I would definitely buy their shares if Nelson were elected to the board." The intervention comes as Disney faces down an investor rebellion led by Mr. Peltz, who is seeking 2 board seats and an overhaul of the company's strategy as it navigates the shift to digital streaming. A crunch vote over the makeup of Disney's board closes on Wednesday evening. And so obviously that did not go the way Elon and Peltz were hoping. Mr. Musk has been a vocal critic of Disney and the leadership of Chief Executive Bob Iger over its decision to halt advertising on Twitter, now rebranded as X, formerly Twitter. Skipping ahead in the article. In his campaign to secure a board seat, Mr. Peltz has lashed out at Disney's slate of recent films with diverse casts. He said in an interview with the Financial Times, people go to watch a movie or a show to be entertained. They don't go to get a message. However, he said he backed the overall leadership of Mr. Iger, who returned from retirement in 2022 to take the helm at Disney after its shares suffered and streaming losses ballooned under his successor, Bob Chapek. Disney has rejected Mr. Peltz's efforts to secure a board seat. Last week, it said he was ill-equipped to serve on Disney's board and that he would, quote, harm Disney and jeopardize our strategic transformation. Now, I suspect people will also remember the stories about Disney down in Florida, the push and pull with Governor Ron DeSantis over whether or not Disney World would remain a city unto itself. It's basically its own private city right there in Florida with its own government and its own laws. It's called the Reedy Creek Improvement District. So between that and the woke stuff, the actual product and the product success itself, the changes in leadership, there's been a lot going on there. And it's quite interesting to see all of this intersecting now with Donald Trump at this point in time. It's very similar in form to how we had all those TikTok issues rise back up again. The Congress passing that bill requiring ByteDance to divest TikTok, and if it doesn't, to be removed from the app stores. That was something that Donald Trump was implementing in 2020. Now we're seeing it come back around all these years later. So we have massive recipient of Defense Department funds, defense contractor Elon Musk, who was already working in an advisory role in the first term. And then we have billionaire businessman Nelson Peltz, the sort of man Donald Trump has probably known for a pretty long time. I don't know that to be true, but billionaires are a small club. Wharton billionaires are an even smaller club. They're around the same age. And Peltz has connections to Hollywood celebrity, professional sports. He is the sort of man who would have crossed paths with Donald Trump many times over the decades. You've got Peltz with Elon on Disney, and Donald Trump has never been shy to comment on that. And now you've got both of them getting involved in a project geared toward election integrity. But let's add another little wrinkle. This is from today. Musk counsels Trump on crypto in sign of billionaire's sway. Elon Musk and Donald Trump are discussing cryptocurrency policy as the former president increasingly highlights Bitcoin and other digital assets on the campaign trail as a way to reach new voters, according to a person familiar with the talks. I don't think he's doing that to reach new voters. It's amazing how these mainstream journalists think that everyone is stupid, and it's probably because they actually believe this stuff. Donald Trump is only talking about Bitcoin because he thinks it's going to help him reach new voters? It's nonsense. Trump campaign officials have also talked about the possibility of inviting Musk to speak at the Republican convention, according to a person with knowledge of those discussions, but are still far from making a final decision. The person familiar who spoke on condition of anonymity to detail the talks did not know if anyone had yet broached the subject with Musk himself. Ah, cool. So Bloomberg, just like Wall Street Journal and all the rest of the media, is just publishing another totally unsubstantiated rumor from an anonymous source. Remember how they used to complain about people doing that? Reading something that some anonymous account said online, some opinion, and then reporting it as though it was fact? That used to be how conspiracy theories started. Now it is just how the mainstream media operates, and maybe it always was. The moves are the latest demonstration of how Musk, a Washington player in his own right, who has weighed in on elections and whose companies boast federal contracts and have bristled at government regulations, is wielding his significant political influence. Trump and Musk are talking about ways for the tech entrepreneur to take on a broad advisory role if Trump wins a second term in November. Though the exact format of that arrangement is still under discussion, a person familiar said. The Wall Street Journal first reported on those talks. Musk has also discussed electric vehicles and the space program with Trump allies, issues directly related to two companies where he serves as chief executive officer, Tesla and SpaceX. And of course, that claim as well is, according to the Wall Street Journal, quoting an anonymous person familiar with the talks. Musk, in a post on X, the platform formerly known as Twitter, said, quote, "Pretty sure I've never discussed crypto with Trump, although I am generally in favor of things that shift power from government to the people, which crypto can do." Gosh, that's incredible, isn't it? Trump spokesman Brian Hughes said many of the nation's most important leaders in technology and innovation are concerned with the damage done to their industry by Biden's failures. The communication between the billionaires has become more frequent in recent months as the campaign ramps up their reliance on Musk for insight about cryptocurrency. In March, Musk attended a donor event for Trump, but suggested after the event that he had no plans to donate to either Trump or President Joe Biden. And that's probably because he's a military contractor. Does that stop other military contractors? No, of course not. The media is trying to spin this on behalf of the Uniparty and Joe Biden by claiming that Biden's actually distancing himself from these billionaires in order to appeal to working class voters. That's what's going to convince them for sure. A few mean tweets to Elon Musk will convince everyone that the Uniparty does not support its billionaires. They're just changing the entire world on behalf of those billionaires for the good of the working class. So we have all of these issues coming back together, and then somehow crypto's involved, and somehow election integrity is involved. Now, there's been a lot of talk over the last few years about a potential blockchain voting strategy, and you can imagine Elon Musk being involved in that, particularly with the fact that Elon Musk is building the parallel energy and communications transmission infrastructure here on the ground and up there in the sky. So it would make sense that there would be potentially a role there. But we were talking earlier about Donald Trump highlighting key points and principles of various issues using these fake trials as a platform to illustrate all of these concepts that we need to understand, not only now, but in the future, concepts that have been generally taught to us when they are mentioned at all by the same people and sources who are projecting and helping to construct this false reality, and all for the same reasons, which is to say we've been misled about a lot of things. So we need to have this experience where we emotionally engage with these subjects, where we actually consider what the stakes of these issues are, which allows us to actually get to the heart of these issues so that we can understand them in a practical way. And often when Trump does this, he'll coordinate with different issues using similar language, keywords, or phrases, highlighting different things at different times. So these Elon Musk stories are coming out yesterday about this new connection with Donald Trump. The New York Times followed up today with a headline that reads, What's behind Elon Musk's bromance with Donald Trump? It's out there. Everybody's got to know about it. We're talking about this meeting. We're maybe talking about cryptocurrency. We're maybe talking about election integrity. Maybe we're talking about blockchain voting, or maybe it's something else. And Donald Trump was sitting in the courtroom yesterday and posting on Truth Social. And one of those posts said nothing more than boring in all caps. And the surface level story was that Donald Trump was in court and it was boring. The closing, we are told, dragged on, went way too long, hours longer than it needed to. All of the jury instructions from Mershon, a total waste of everyone's time, money, effort, energy, etc. But then also, you got to remember that Elon Musk has a company that digs tunnels underground, and that company is called the Boring Company. Now, obviously, I cannot prove to you that Donald Trump was talking about Elon Musk's Boring Company and that these stories, all of this is just coming together at one time. Trump is trying to tip us off in a different direction. I obviously have no way of knowing that. It could just be a coincidence. Trump was bored in the courtroom and posted boring. The Wall Street Journal just found out about these Trump-Musk meetings the same way the New York Times just found out about the 3.5-year-old pictures of Samuel Alito's upside-down flag. And they fired up those news articles and sent them out hot off the presses. It's totally possible that's what happened. But it's also possible there's something more than that. And if you look up Elon Musk and boring and see what's been going on, last week, apparently, Elon announced on X, formerly Twitter, last week that the Boring Company is having great success in this system of tunnels they are digging under Las Vegas. He wrote, "The Boring Company connects another hotel in Vegas. Within a few years, you will be able to get to all major destinations in the city super fast with electric cars in tunnels. No need to imagine. You can try it today between Resorts World and the Convention Center." And I don't know about you, but I find all of this very interesting. We have an energy and comms, potentially currency and national defense parallel infrastructure being built on the ground, in the ground, and up in the sky, primarily by this man, Elon Musk. And now apparently they're building entirely new transportation grids, I guess you could call them, underneath major cities. Or hey, maybe, just maybe, there were already tunnels there. I bet we could know one way or another about whether or not there were tunnels there, but instead we are focused on ridiculous things like sun farts, fluffy cotton candy planets, and apparently massive hailstorms in the middle of also massive heat waves, even in Mexico. I talked about this a bit on the live stream yesterday. But CNN reported on places in Mexico receiving multiple feet of hail during a summer heat wave. Now, if you knew that weather could be manipulated, you would think, oh, well, that can't be real. That's clearly a weather manipulation. But despite weather manipulation being real, if you think it's being used for anything untoward, then it's a conspiracy theory, which makes it partly fake despite the fact that it's real. So if you suggest that something like getting multiple feet of hail during a heat wave is weird and unnatural, well, then you're a conspiracy theorist. The Daily Mail published in their science section today a story with the headline, "Deadly Heat Dome Weather Event Scorches Parts of the U.S. with up to 111-degree Fahrenheit temperatures this week. Here are the cities most at risk." They're now showing you what cities are at risk of being hot. In the article, it says, soaring temperatures have already begun to fuel violent thunderstorms in Houston and Dallas, Texas in the past 2 weeks, and reached a record-breaking 115 degrees Fahrenheit on Memorial Day, breaking the previous record of 108 degrees in May 1998. The heat dome that spread across Mexico since March has already claimed the lives of more than 24 people and killed 157 endangered howler monkeys. So they don't know the exact number of humans. It's more than 24, reportedly, but it is definitely 157 dead howler monkeys. So the weather, a natural occurrence, a totally natural occurrence. It's a conspiracy theory if you think the weather can be an unnatural occurrence, at least if you don't like that sort of thing. If you do like that sort of thing, I mean, like if you think the science is really cool or whatever, you can tell them, hey, the weather manipulation you're doing, it's so cool. Can you tell me more about how it's done? And then they will tell you. And then you could be like, aha, gotcha, commie. I know how this game is played. All I had to do was tell you that I thought your science was cool. And then you confessed absolutely everything that you call a conspiracy theory otherwise. It's like the scientists have a hierarchy of needs, and telling them that they are smart and interesting, well, that supersedes absolutely everything else they could ever possibly think. As soon as you flatter them that way, then they'll just admit to everything. So now we have a phenomenon known as a heat dome. And I guess you're supposed to think about this as though you are some sort of insect or lizard trapped in some kind of terrarium. Or maybe someone's got a magnifying glass and they are directing the sunlight in your direction, thus burning you. That must be what they mean, because they definitely don't believe there's like an actual dome up there, like a firmament or anything. I mean, that would mean like we're trapped and can't get off this planet. And everybody knows we can get off this planet. In fact, we have to. Otherwise, we will never be able to escape the fact that the sun will not stop attacking the Earth. And while we're on the subject of things that obviously aren't true, despite the fact that the news says they are, this is the Jerusalem Post from yesterday, May 29th. And I know it's anti-Semitic to say that the Jerusalem Post contains fake news, but you tell me what you think. The headline is, asteroid the size of 54 Donald Trumps to pass Earth on Friday. According to NASA, this is what NASA says. A large asteroid the size of 54 Donald Trumps is set to pass by Earth on Friday, March 31st, according to NASA's asteroid tracker. According to the Center for Near-Earth Object Studies at NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory, the asteroid in question was designated 2008 XH. So maybe we're getting a blast from the past. Maybe we're going to go back 16 years in time. I would be down, to be honest. We could go back and cut that whole Barack Obama thing right off at the pass. Maybe we wouldn't have to do any of this at all. 54 Donald Trumps are headed in our general direction, and they are going to blast us back to 2008. The large cosmic object is one of several that will pass by the Earth in the coming days, though it is unlikely to hit us. I mean, thank goodness they were able to make up the math equations for the simulation that suggested an asteroid the size of 54 Donald Trumps might be somewhere near the Earth, hurtling through that dark, infinite void. The article then goes into a lengthy discussion of exactly how large Donald Trump is, for real. Following subheadings are, this asteroid is huge. How big are the other asteroids passing Earth? Good asteroids on both sides. Could an asteroid hit the Earth in 2024? And sad. Can we stop an asteroid impact? And I will go ahead and share that with you because I imagine you are probably scared of asteroids. Scientists have found ways of mitigating the risk of a potentially disastrous asteroid impact. The method with the most success thus far has been kinetic deflection, as shown by NASA's Double Asteroid Redirection Test mission, which altered an asteroid's orbital path. So if we have enough warning, we should be safe from disaster. They were able to, quote unquote, prove that the DART system redirected the asteroid based on measurements that they took before, during, and after. And assuming that all those calculations are correct and those measurements actually measured something represented in the real world, in reality prime, then they've been able to generate numbers that say the asteroid moved off its course. And of course, absolutely none of that is true or verifiable in any way. By the way, NASA's DART mission, they do that in coordination with Israeli scientists. And according to the Jerusalem Post, this is part of NASA's Iron Dome. Indeed, NASA's DART mission is paving the way forward in the field of planetary defense, finding a way to defend Earth against one of the most devastating kinds of natural disasters, a kind we currently have no means of defense against. Well, here's our means of defense against that. They're not real. It is no wonder, then, that many in Israel have called the DART mission NASA's Iron Dome, comparing it to the Israeli missile defense system that causes incoming rockets to explode before they hit their targets. I'm sharing all this with you out of pure amazement, by the way. It's true in a sense, but the difference is that the Iron Dome destroys missiles which are much smaller than the asteroid, he explained. Say an asteroid that's 100 meters wide is set to crash above Washington, D.C. If that happens, no Iron Dome can help you because they're far too weak. Well, what a hypothetical he chose. 100-meter wide asteroid set to crash above Washington, D.C., our nation's capital. Oh, hey, at least Israel are our closest allies. Another issue is that the Iron Dome still causes missiles to explode, which is not something you should do with an asteroid. We don't want to blow up an asteroid. We want to push them away, Polishuk explained. It's really hard to make an object that is 100 meters in diameter explode. Besides, no one can build a missile that is 100 meters wide. And if they did, it would be terrifying. Laughing, he added, "Of course, given the current political climate, I'd be more afraid of missiles from war than an asteroid." The way the DART mission works is by smashing a spacecraft into an asteroid to slightly adjust its orbit. This causes it to change its course and prevents any possible collision through what is known as kinetic deflection. This is all new territory, and DART is providing extremely important information for how any of this would work. It's all science, just science. Nothing to see here beyond science. Really, really interesting science, figured out by the smartest people in the entire world, obviously the scientists. That's why you have to trust them without being able to check their work, but it's hard to do that when they're just making things up. Now, it's also possible that all of this is some sort of weird communications. I mean, we know we're told about events, and sometimes we know those events really happen, and they seem to be nothing more than narrative deployments because the actuality of the event is irrelevant, but the narrative itself becomes highly relevant. And I think one of the greatest examples of that in relatively recent history was the sky circle, which is an airborne object of intense worship, also known by normies as the Chinese spy balloon. That's right. The Chinese, they had spy balloons up there. It's not that satellites are just those things. These are actually spy balloons. And their spy balloon, it got off course and it floated over Alaska and over Canada for a while, down through Montana, and it just traversed the entire country, following along a path of where our military bases are, stealing all of our military base information. There's no other way that the Chinese, with all of their intelligence, could have ever done this. They needed this spy balloon to traverse the entire United States, embarrassing Joe Biden thoroughly in the process. Joe Biden eventually directed the military to shoot down that damn Chinese spy balloon off the coast of South Carolina. They couldn't do it, you see, over the U.S. mainland because they were worried about the size of the debris field that might be left by this Chinese spy balloon. If we blow this thing up over the mainland, little pieces of Chinese spy balloon might fall everywhere. Would there be a 100-meter long piece of spy balloon falling down on Washington, D.C.? No, probably not, but you never know. 300 feet, it's not that big. That's how big the asteroid was that Israeli scientist said could hit Washington, D.C. And he wasn't talking about missiles. He was just joking around about something that could happen as a natural disaster from an asteroid. Nothing that large could actually be held up in the sky by balloons. Certainly not satellites in low Earth orbit. Everybody knows that those are traveling at 17,000 miles an hour, circling around the Earth as the Earth circles, ellipses around a sun 93 million miles away through a bleak, black, infinite void. Now, the sky circles became an obsession. Not for me, of course. I mean, we talked about the sky circles and honored them properly. I don't think any of us worshiped the sky circles, but if you did, I'm not going to blame you. I know they're fantastic. But every now and again, I think maybe we didn't do enough because other people keep calling them Chinese spy balloons when they're obviously sky circles. They're clearly far more important than spy equipment from this nation that is already the recipient of all of our intelligence about virtually every subject from our own uniparty operating on behalf of the global regime that the Chinese Communist Party is, or at least was, a substantial part of. All of that, of course, put in place by the same globalists running the uniparty right now, including and especially the neoconservatives, who actually aren't conservatives at all and are just ideological descendants from Trotsky. Isn't it weird how we have communism on, quote unquote, the right too? Now, of course, we are told that communism is so dangerous because of the Chinese and because of the little rocket man in North Korea, Kim Jong-un. It's not from the people who started communism, the people who still have collectivist movements all across the world and have since they started those movements well over a century ago. And of course, I'm talking about Bolshevism and Nazism and fascism and socialism and Zionism, and obviously their representatives here in America, neoliberalism and neoconservatism, at least when they're not being more honest about it and just calling it progressivism or communism. I know that over the course of the last few decades, we've been told that we don't have communism in America. It could never happen here. But of course, we could have communism, and we do have communism, and we've had it for quite a while. In fact, it's virtually all we've had. There are just different brands of it. You have communism through equality and social justice. Those are your Democrats. You have communism through militarism and dominance. Those are your Republican neocons. That's the GOP establishment. And then you have global communism through, quote unquote, free trade and laissez-faire morality in the Libertarian Party. It's all really the same thing, and we are told to fear absolutely all of it whenever it's coming from someone other than those people. Because those people, they're not communists. Yes, they've practiced communism in all its various forms for well over a century, and they've written all the books on it. Everything in favor of all those collectivist ideologies. It all comes from the same group of people, but when they do it, it's good. It's just like the weather manipulation, you see. But when they've done it in a place and then they are removed from that place, or if they've never totally taken control of that place and they just operate it as a proxy, if anything ever happens with that relationship and it sours, well, then those leaders in those places, those are the real communists, and communism becomes a problem again. And of course, we see that very often with Xi Jinping. They tried to convince us that Vladimir Putin was a communist for a little while, just because Russia at some point used to be communist because of the Bolsheviks. And so apparently then it's just communist forever, no matter who's running it and no matter what agenda they're pursuing. But the worst and scariest of all right now, besides, terrorists and Vladimir Putin, whatever they decide he is on any given day, is the little rocket man himself, Kim Jong-un. This is CBS News. Yesterday, North Korea flies hundreds of balloons full of trash over South Korea. I wonder what little rocket man is trying to say with this great display. North Korea flew hundreds of trash-carrying balloons toward South Korea in one of its most bizarre provocations against its rival in years, prompting the South's military to mobilize chemical and explosive response teams to recover objects and debris in different parts of the country. Well, thank goodness the military was able to get their response together. They had a long, slow warning, kind of like when Iran sent all of those hundreds of drones and rockets attacking Israel. And it just happened over the course of 2 or 3 or 4 hours. And thank goodness they shot them all down Otherwise, we would have had World War III, all these crazy, slow-moving provocations. Well, let's get back to the article. The ballooning campaign came as North Korean leader Kim Jong-un urged his military scientists to overcome a failed satellite launch and continue developing space-based reconnaissance capabilities, which he described as crucial for countering U.S. and South Korean military activities, state media said Wednesday. In his first public comments about the launch failure, Kim also warned of unspecified stern action against South Korea over an exercise involving 20 fighter jets near the inter-Korean border hours before North Korea's failed launch on Monday. In a speech Tuesday, Kim called the South Korean response hysterical insanity and, quote, a very dangerous provocation that cannot be ignored. The North's official Central News Agency said Wednesday. Now, they're referring to this story on Monday. This is from Politico. North Korean rocket carrying its second spy satellite explodes in midair. A rocket launched by North Korea to deploy the country's second spy satellite exploded shortly after liftoff Monday, state media reported, in a setback for leader Kim Jong-un's hopes to field satellites to monitor the U.S. and South Korea. Monday's failed launch came hours after leaders of South Korea, China, and Japan met in Seoul in their first trilateral meeting in more than 4 years. It's highly unusual for North Korea to take provocative action when China, its major ally and economic pipeline, is engaging in high-level diplomacy in the region. The launch drew rebukes from the North's neighbors because the UN bans North Korea from conducting any such launches, viewing them as covers for testing long-range missile technology. I guess North Korea doesn't care much about the UN either. The North's official Korean Central News Agency said it launched a spy satellite aboard a new rocket at its main northwestern space center. But KCNA said the rocket blew up during a first-stage flight soon after liftoff due to a suspected engine problem. So an international embarrassment for North Korea. They just can't even launch a second spy satellite up into the sky. But we are supposed to be worried about nuclear attacks from North Korea. In fact, that was the plan all along, especially if Hillary Clinton won. We were going to get in a nuclear war with North Korea. We were told that many times by the regime. Trump's mentioned it many times as well. It's almost like the regime was using North Korea as this idea of a rogue state that could always be threatening to us. If nuclear weapons are going to be held over our heads as an existential threat in case we fail to comply with the regime's demands or fail to trust the science, well, then there needs to be someone out there who would actually use these weapons against us. So that's what you need a North Korea for, or a Russia while they're fighting Ukraine, or Iran, or, terrorists with a dirty nuke or a suitcase nuke. So we're supposed to be scared of them, but then we also get reports about how incompetent they are. In another sign of tensions between the war-divided rivals, South Korea's Joint Chiefs of Staff said North Korea has also been flying large numbers of balloons carrying trash toward the south since Tuesday night, in apparent retaliation against South Korean activists for flying anti-Pyongyang propaganda leaflets across the border. The South's military said about 260 North Korean balloons were found dropped in various parts of the country as of Wednesday afternoon and were being recovered by military rapid response and explosive clearance teams. It advised civilians not to touch the objects flown from North Korea and to report to military or police after discovering them. Local media reports said some balloons also carried toilet paper and suspected animal feces into the South, according to AFP. The promise from North Korean Vice Defense Minister Kim Kang-il was that North Korea was planning to scatter, quote, mounds of waste paper and filth over the border areas in response to the leafleting. And then a few hours later, we had this. South Korea says North Korea has fired barrage of missiles toward its eastern waters. ABC News says the launches came after North Korea flew hundreds of trash-carrying balloons toward the south since Tuesday night in retaliation against South Korean activists flying anti-North Korean propaganda leaflets across the border. North Korean leader Kim Jong-un had warned of unspecified overwhelming actions against South Korea after it staged an aerial exercise involving 20 fighter jets near the inter-Korean border hours before North Korea attempted to launch its second military reconnaissance satellite. So it seems like Lil Rocket Man is worried that South Korea, or its allies, that'd be us, interfered somehow with the launch of his Chinese spy balloon. And because he wasn't able to have his sky circle, he sent South Korea a bunch of shit circles. Now, we saw Donald Trump unite the leaders of North and South Korea and cross the DMV. And if we keep that in context of the rest of the meetings Donald Trump had with world leaders on that trip, you'll remember the orb and the sword dance in the Middle East, the soccer ball with Vladimir Putin, going into the Forbidden City with Xi Jinping, etc. And Donald Trump's communications with Kim Jong-un, the back and forth about Lil Rocket Man and Fire and Fury and My Button's Bigger, all of that was done to show that North Korea doesn't actually pose a threat to the United States. Certainly not the threat we were told North Korea posed as this nuclear rogue state. And we were shown that a peaceful future for North Korea was possible. And it seems to me that all of that could be a takeaway from all of this. It's so ridiculous. It's so over the top. Hot air balloons filled with trash and manure just sent through the sky, a big visual display. We're being told that World War III is coming and that these countries might be involved is sending shit circles in the sky. That is where we are right now. And it's worth mentioning as we wrap up, I will have more on this tomorrow, of course, Donald Trump has now been found guilty on all counts in his fake trial in New York. The sentencing is anticipated to take place on July 11th, just a few days before Donald Trump becomes officially the Republican nominee at the Republican National Convention. Who knows if this opens up the door for shenanigans from the RNC? I suspect we will see narratives along those lines. I will be back tomorrow at the same reasonable time on the same reasonable podcast network. I don't have a network. Masks and lockdowns don't work. They lied to you about a pandemic. And Joe Biden will never be president.
In my mind, that's the end game.
If you're listening to this episode for free, you can support me and support the show and the work I do by signing up for a paid subscription at imyourmoderator.substack.com. You can do so for as low as $50 a year or $5 a month. Comes out to under a quarter per episode, and you'll blast right through the paywall for all of the writing. The merch store is www.cancelcouture.com, and you can find everything else by heading to Linktree, linktree.com/imyourmoderator. And I'll see you soon out on the range. It's happening!